If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniac. This happened to me and my friend Sam 3 winters ago. We like to explore nature and walking around outside, and our friends had recently introduced us to this beautiful place in Wisconsin that we've visited 3 or 4 times with them. Every time we gone with them, it had been a pleasant trip. We walked around, got some beautiful views of Lake Michigan, sat in crooks of trees, and spoke about books and gaming and other things. We'd been starting a new game of Hunter, and we're talking about it. Now I should mention we're both female and 5'2" each. The first time she and I are alone, it's around dusk. We go to take some pictures that we could Photoshop for the game. The park is massive. There are lots of bridges, footpaths, and winding roads. We're walking over a bridge that sat against one of the roads, with dense woods on either side. And we're crossing and a car drives by. Someone rolls down the window and yells out, "Hey!" We're both startled and jump, but dismiss them. We continue across the bridge. Less than a minute later, the car comes back driving in the other direction. And this time, the driver's window rolls down, and the driver calls out, "Hey, come here." And we pick up the pace. The car drives away, and right as we're about to hit the edge of the bridge, the car comes at us again from the original direction. We then book it up to the trees up the hill, and we hear the car stop, and the 2 men yelling at us. We continue running and hid in the dark for 15 minutes or so until they leave. We run back to our car and left. You'd think we'd avoid the park after that, but once we had gotten out of there, we had a good laugh about being scared. We went back to the park with our friends a few times and nothing scary happened. So she and I decided to return. Just the 2 of us, again. Sam and I often spent our afternoons and early mornings exploring the outside, hiking, and just sitting outside the parks talking. We head back around dusk again, with the camera to take more pictures. Now, obviously looking back, we both feel foolish for having headed back alone, and around the same time to the same place. But like I said, we had gone a few more times with other people and nothing happened. So we go back and are about to walk over the same bridge when a car rolls by and you know who starts yelling at us. Now, we don't wait for them to drive around. We duck into the woods, starting walking towards the pier. We figured we'd abandon the other photo spot, only exploring the pier and take some lake shots. Not really what we're looking for, but we figure if we make it in time for the sunset, we could take some nice pictures over the lake for fun. The way the pier is set up is that there's a long road that leads from where the pier is to the top of a hill to a parking lot. The pier is at the end, closer to the parking lot. If you walk down from the pier, you eventually find a bridge leading into a development with a tennis course. So we begin walking down the road to the lake when the same car from before drives down into the parking lot by the pier. They didn't say anything because they drove past, but We decided to slow down and decided whether or not we wanted to continue down by the pier. The car also turns into the lot and came back up the road. The car reached where we are and stops, so we immediately turned, beginning to walk down the hill. All of the windows roll down. We now see that there's 4 guys and 1 girl. They yell hello, and Sam and I turn to wave. One of them says, "Hey, wait for us." Now mind you, we're 2 small females, but people bundled up in winter clothing. You can barely see any of us. We try and ignore them and make it to base, but they yell, "We're coming back for you," as they begin driving up the hill. Sam and I decided not to take any chances now and start running down the hill. We hear shouting and hollering and see them disappear over the top. We start running towards a bridge, and once you've gotten over the bridge to the left, there was a concrete deck with a drop off and a ramp about 5 feet tall, so that if you got off the bridge and jumped down the right way, you're at the bottom of the ramp and couldn't see from the other side down if you duck, and that's what we do. We hear the car speeding back down the hill, and all 4 doors open and close as they all start screaming and laughing to come back, and they just want to play. Most of them take off to the pier, 2 stay behind, and we can make out bits and pieces of what they're saying. Where did they go? Don't worry, we'll find them. Sam and I are huddled over freaking out, and once it has been silent near the bridge for a while, we decide to peek out to see if the other 2 have also left, but then we see we can sneak up to the hill. But as we peek over, there's a guy at the other end of the bridge and he sees us. "Over here," he screams to his buddies and starts running across the bridge to us. We take off towards the development, running along the side of the tennis court while being chased by 3 of them. Only one of them is very close, about 30 feet. The rest of them are catching up very fast. We took a quick turn to 2 houses in the subdivision, and we luckily never saw them from then. We got back to our car by walking through the forest preserve, doing so incredibly slowly. We're terrified out of our minds. We left that night and called our friends we normally went to the preserve with. From then on, we never went back there. Followed by a mime in the forest near my house by Justin Miko. This happened to me and mainly my sister back in 2008. We're from the Netherlands, in a little village I guess you can say, called Windsor, which is part of the city Nijmegen. There is a circular path in the wooded section of our neighbourhood, so kind of an outline here. Our backyard faced a pond. You had to walk along the pond around 2 or 3 minutes before you entered the woods. It's right away near the path, which would go in a large circle within the woods. Usually people take their dogs out there, or we're just jogging, you know, typical everyday stuff. It's absolutely beautiful though. Me and my family always take our dogs out there. The circle took about half an hour to walk, so it was good for exercise. Alright, so you guys have a vision. I'll start my story. I was around 10 at the time. My sister was 14. She decided to take our dogs and asked me to come along. Taking that I didn't have much to do at the time, I said sure. So we're walking the normal path. We had a small dog and a big one. I was taking the big dog with me. He was a typical alpha dog, always wanting to be up front. Our smaller dog, whose name was Envy, was typically very calm and likes taking her time. She was sniffing on spots for a good length of time. Jip was getting anxious, wanting to keep on walking, so he was pulling me, being 10 at the time, having a lot of force. So I told my sister I'd be a bit further up while she left Envy there sniffing stuff. She's fine with that. Now, we live in a super safe area. It's just like your typical western village. No troublemakers around. It's just a super clean cut area. So we never assumed anything would go wrong. It just never occurred to us. Whilst I had turned the corner of the four-pointed forest path, I looked back and saw Envy was still profusely sniffing, so I walked a bit further, out of sight of my sister. Not even a minute later, she came frantically around the corner, hurrying Envy along with her, telling me keep going. I see the fear on her face as I was told. The way home she was dead silent, not saying a thing. I was of course very scared, not knowing how to react, so I was just keeping up pace. Jip also helps with that. But once we make it home, I said to her what has happened. She said she sees a man dressed up as a mime staring at her from behind a tree. She tried to act like she didn't notice, but her facial expression probably given it away. As she began walking, Mime started following her. Not on the path though, systematically behind each tree. She swore every time she looks back, he's behind the next tree. Apparently when she turns a corner, she can't see him anymore, and starts running. I really didn't know what to think of it. I felt bad I had gone further with Jip, but my 10-year-old mind didn't really assume anything. My sister hasn't said anything about it since that day, but she knew for certain she was looking at a man dressed as a mime. It didn't seem to affect her much afterwards, luckily, but it must have been quite a scare knowing that I wasn't in sight, and knowing some freak dressed up as a mime was following her. Luckily nothing else happened, and we moved ever since.
I worked for a reality show. Okay, it was more like a web series or YouTube channel. We didn't make much money off it. Our viewership was small but loyal. I don't know, I guess it was fun. We travelled a lot. We got to drink on set. I even met my boyfriend on the show. And with only 3 of us, we were a very productive tight group. Think Bar Rescue without the histrionics, and Ghost Adventures without the BS. We were Hilda's Haunted Happy Hour. We operated on a small but cool concept. We go to haunted bars, and with the owner's permission, sit around at 3 AM, the witching hour, and drink like fish while trying to capture paranormal stuff. Of course the owner tells us of all the legends and stories about the place, but yeah, we're mostly there to get drunk. After all, the owners can't complain, they get free exposure and we get free drinks. The crew consisted of me, our host Hilda, and my boyfriend Jason. We were all 3 horror enthusiasts. Maybe alcoholics as well, but yeah. I enjoyed getting drunk and scared. Who wouldn't? And Jason, what more can I say? For us, it was all good love at first sight. 2 late 20s hipsters in search of our big break into filming. Crew gigs, directing, whatever. We wanted to live and breathe cinema, and hopefully, Hilda was our first step. At the very least, I love Jason in all his grungy glory. His cute smile and sense of humour melted me from the start, as did his horrific wardrobe. Ripped jeans, bland hoodies, a beanie that never seemed to leave his long hair. Yeah, he was strange, and destined for directing, just like me. I didn't dress any better, and yes, I wore a beanie over my cropped red hair. We both smoked and drank. We were two neurotic night owls. For months now, we've been talking about writing our own autobiographical dramedy. How Jason met Alice. We'd even start setting aside money from our haunted happy hour pay for this micro-budget production. I was going to write and co-direct it with Jason. The only problem was Hilda. She was simultaneously our biggest champion and detriment. Our shoots were long, and they never ended. Hilda didn't believe in taking breaks or hiatus. Then again, she was in her early 40s, so maybe thought her shot at stardom was shrinking while ours was just getting started. She was a theoretically trained actress after all, Hilda Harker. I believe she was from New York before migrating to Atlanta. Her IMDb was okay, lots of soaps and commercials, nothing special. I will say her look was unique though, like a Hispanic Marlene Dietrich. Her boobs were about as fake as her name, but hey, they were eye-grabbing, just like her screen presence. To be honest, I was never too sure how Hilda had stopped this low to be doing YouTube stuff. I mean, in the grand scheme of talented actors and actresses, which Hilda was for sure, doing these low-budget shows was maybe one step above prostitution and stripping. And Hilda could be quite charming. I mean, she could charm anyone, both genders for that matter. And yes, for the record, she did try and seduce me and Jason on separate occasions. We politely declined. Like I said, Hilda and Dietrich-esque. For whatever reason, whether it was racism or sexism, Hilda just never quite made it. And for me and Jason, well, that turned out to be our blessing. After all, without Hilda's failures, she would never have posted that desperate Craigslist ad, and then me and him would have never been brought along for this wild ride. So even with the measly pay we got from Hilda and the show's revenue, we trooped on. I'm talking multiple shows a week, all across the southeast. On this tight budget, travel arrangements also sucked. We had to ride around in Hilda's tiny Toyota. Yeah, not even a goddamn bus or van. I wouldn't say our filmmaking quality was the best either, but hey, we kept it fun. Together, we all had the warm camaraderie of a jovial podcast. I imagine you're probably wondering if we ever experienced any true paranormal activity whilst getting plastered. I mean, we did, but it was never anything flashy really. Unlike all the other Go shows, we never faked anything. Regardless of how much Hilda or some other bar owners wanted to, my goal was to keep us as authentic as possible. After all, my goal wasn't to attract idiots. There were plenty of shows that catered to the bored of housewives and drunk college kids who loved the silly dramatics and fake spirits. We want to cater to the sincere paranormal enthusiasts, the real ones. That was my goal for the Haunted Happy Hour from the start, and as a result, our fanbase only grew and became more loyal with each episode. All that being said, we did actually capture some honest-to-goodness paranormal footage. You know, like doors slamming, creepy voices and groans, glasses falling off tables, orbs, the cool subtle stuff that still give you chills. Our first ever Halloween episode had been a rousing success, so naturally, Hilda wasn't looking to slow down, not when we had momentum. Over the next few weeks, as we explored other bars without incident, she demanded we do a Thanksgiving episode. The Wednesday night before Thanksgiving to be exact. I told her there was no way me and Jason were missing Black Friday shopping. The only problem was finding a nice location. Everyone kept shooting me what the F responded to my emails. Thanksgiving was one of those few times I guess I could close or half-arse it. Needless to say, no one wanted us bargaining it on their holidays like that. Just a few days before our planned Turkey Day event, I got a reply from someone who finally accepted our ridiculous proposal. Someone as desperate as us, I figured. The Pirate's House. Yeah, the Pirate's House was the bar's name. A infamous haunted tavern in Savannah, Georgia. All kinds of legends took place there. Murders, affairs, scandals. And not just pirates either, but stories happening throughout the Civil War and the Great Depression as well. In Savannah, the Pirate's House was basically a time capsule of a bar. And somehow, the owner Ruth Flynn had agreed to it. That Wednesday, an excited Hilda drove us to Savannah in her reliable Toyota. We got into town pretty late that night, and after checking into a cheap motel, we made our way towards Ruth's bar. Me with my camcorder, Jason with the boom mic, and Hilda with a huge purse full of ghost haunting devices. Not many people were out and about on the river street. They were all spending the heartwarming holiday with their families, I figured. And here we were, spending it with ghosts and alcohol. The cool November air swept through us like we were at the sea. Keeping my arms folded against my hoodie, I felt like a shivering pirate. The pirate's house is a small place tucked away on the corner, barely noticeable amidst the sea of other tourist traps and dive bars. If not for history, you'd think this place would have gone under decades, if not centuries ago. Nothing special was on the outside, other than old, mouldy bricks, and a swinging sign bearing the bar's name. A sign complete with bold letters and cartoony pirates. You know, like the kind of friendly characters you'd expect to see in a pirate place. Such a stark design screamed "No tourist welcome." However, I figured maybe the bar's modest appearance was the point. There were no pretensions for these kinds of places back in the 18th century. People came here to drink and brawl, not enjoy the atmosphere like now, certainly not for overpriced beer and a trivial night. The front door was open just a crack when we got there. Ruth must have been expecting us. "Should we just walk in?" a nervous Jason asked. Chuckling, Hilda led the way. "Yeah." We hadn't even talked to Ruth on the phone. Hell, we weren't even sure if this was what the place looked like. But Hilda didn't care. She never did when it came to getting the show done. The pirate's house interior was more the same ugly rawness. I guess you could call it period detail. To me, it looked more like period cheapness, like clever owners who use historical accuracy as an excuse to let the place go to crap, rather than update it. God, I can only imagine the mass profits they cleaned up from all the tourists and college kids. The money damn sure didn't go into how the bar looked. Once we entered, the heavy wooden door slammed shut behind us, startling everyone except Hilda. We were now in the sea of blackness, save for a stray candle and lantern. It was going to be hard as hell to find a cold spot when the entire bar felt like a walk-in freezer. At least I knew the beer would be cold. Uneasy, I studied the bar. The building was tiny. A couple of bathrooms were near the bar. I saw a curtain in the very back that I figured led to the kitchen. Tables were scattered about, but space was at a premium. The bar counter dominated most of the main room we were in. Its wood pristine and strong like a ship's hull. Handcrafted stools lined up all down the counter, and of course, there were alcohol and goblets galore right behind the bar. I'd never seen so much rum in my life. With each step, the wooden floorboards creaked beneath my feet, agonizing groans like the painful cries of anguished old men in the middle of the night. Considering the ambience of Jolly Roger flags, I could tell this joint took the pirate theme pretty seriously. The tables were positioned on top of treasure chests, for God's sake. In the corner, you could even take a picture with a crow's nest. Surrounding us, sharp swords hung on the walls. The pirate's house presented us with a grimmer, more realistic attraction. A bar with the grittiness of Blackbeard, without the flamboyance of Jack Sparrow. "Looks good," Hilda said for the camera. "Ahoy there, mateys!" A booming voice echoed towards us. The raspy tone felt forced, too soft and cheerful to be intimidating. Startled, we all turned to see an older lady emerge from behind the curtain. She looked 60 to 65, tall with broad shoulders, but a sweet face. Her big, beaming smile and pearly whites greeted us. Less intimidating than her tone was her ridiculous costume. Even in the dim lighting, it looked silly. The puffy shirt, the red vest, the tall black hat, the sword attached to her belt, and yes, a fake parrot on her shoulder. For a second, I considered walking out. With that wide smile, Captain Ruth looked like an escaped inmate who just had too much fun in the costume shop. Displaying her fake smile, Hilda approached Ruth. "Hello, you must be Ruth." Ruth stuck out her hand. "Ruth Flynn." Even from here where I stood, I could see the calluses and scars on Ruth's craggy hands, either battle-scarred or manning a pirate ship or a bar. Hilda completed the exchange, her groomed hand in the polar opposite of Ruth's. "Oh yes," Hilda said to Ruth, "it's nice to meet you." Like a showman, Ruth motioned around the bar. "Welcome to the pirate's house, scoundrels," she barked in her awful pirate impersonation. "Nice," Jason quipped. "Is that your usual voice for this?" Ruth chuckled. "I only use it for the introductions," she said in a kind tone, a natural voice I assumed, like a sociable southern belle. She waved at her costume. "I've been doing this for 20 years now. The kids love it." "I bet," Hilda said. Holding the camera, I secured a close-up of Ruth and the parrot. "Does everyone dress like that?" I asked, curious. Ruth nodded. "All my employees do." "Ouch," Jason chuckled. I don't mind it, Ruth said, gleeful, as she caressed the fake parrot. Her smile never left her lips. I like to think it's more fun than wearing a uniform. I was almost disappointed she had no gold teeth. I quite like it, Hilda said, faking a laugh that'd make daytime anchors cringe. But how long has this bar been running now? Well, I'd say about 20 years, Ruth answered. Wow, Hilda exclaimed. Yeah, all the previous owners didn't seem to care much about the history here. I mean, the Pirate's House has been in Savannah since the Revolutionary War. There's so much culture, and I just wanted to make it so much more authentic. That's why we wear the pirates' outfits. You make it feel like a real treasure island. Well, you certainly did that, Hilda said to Ruth. I pointed over to the swords. So you did all this yourself? Excited, Ruth looked over all the weapons. I saw reverence in her eyes. Oh yeah, Ruth answered. She faced me. I just had to inject the history here. Her southern accent was like a methodical melody. Very pretty yet slow, even melodramatic. She had strength in those AARP lungs. We need pride here at the Pirate's House. She waved her hands towards the swords. I had Bradley help me put them up. Bradley, Hilda asked. Is he here right now? Giggling, Ruth caressed Hilda's shoulder. No, he's my son. He helps out when he can. She looked at the camera. Of course, he can't really help with the drinks. Like Hilda, she had a screen presence. Only rather than possessing Hilda's glamorous sex bomb appeal, Ruth had aged good looks and southern charm. Like Scarlett O'Hara, who wore her age with pride. But the boy loves pirates. I even gave him a costume to wear. I chuckled. That's cute. Hilda motioned Ruth towards the bar. Shall we start the show? And like that, we carried on with Hilda's happy haunted hour. There we were at the bar, Hilda and Ruth behind the counter, me and Jason on the stalls. Given the candles and lanterns, this was an intimate setting for our show. Jason and I didn't even need to manufacture any atmosphere. No need for our strobe lights or fog machines. The swords or pirate stuff made it creepy enough, much less Ruth's outfit. And all the while, we were riveted by Ruth's every word. She was a natural-born southern storyteller. Her tales of the Pirate's House, legendary past, captivated us. Everyone from Blackbeard to Stonewall Jason had had a drink here. Maybe it was crap, but I don't know. But I'll be damned if Ruth's sincerity didn't sell it. Her pirate outfit made it the more surreal too. I felt either like a kid listening to a pirate mascot at an amusement park, or like I was really on a pirate ship. A ship where I'd been captured and forced to listen to the grave tales of the most grizzled pirate on board. A tough female pirate at that. Out of the legends and myths though, the one Ruth harped on about the most was the most terrifying. Not Blackbeard or the Captain Kidd. He was a man I'd never heard of. A tall, brooding scoundrel, as Ruth had said in her chesty voice. But not even her hammy tone could mar the terror of Bruce Joad. He was a pirate who terrorized the Georgia coast, specifically Tybee Island. I had no idea if Ruth was being honest about the descriptions, treyarchy and cannibalism of this man's lore. Maybe Joad's eye patch and peg leg were all part of the sensationalism. I don't know. I sure hoped it was. Instead, all I knew is that Joad and his crew sailed the Georgia coast around the 1780s. He tormented all those they found on stray boats or on the shore in a bloody reign of terror that went on far too long. While the dark-haired Joad killed man and woman, he saved his worst for children. See, Joad wasn't one for enlightenment thinking. To him, immortal youth was possible, but only by consuming it. He took you are what you ate literally. So he did, yeah, as you can imagine. No, this wasn't walking the plank or a sword fight. This was absolutely brutal, and even in Ruth's southern gentle accent, I was beyond horrified by the account. She didn't spare us any details either. Joad and his men dismembered the children after decapitating them, and they ate them down to the bone, sometimes raw, sometimes cooked, it didn't matter. Babies, infants, pre-teens. The only cut-off point seemed to be around 18. I was glad to hear when Bruce Joad got his comeuppance in Savannah. I was less than confused though when Ruth told us it was in this very bar, during a card game gone awry. A bar fight had erupted, and Bruce Joad got done in. I could only imagine Joad suffering his fate right where I stood at this moment. The fact that Ruth and Bruce Joad still haunt his pirate's house to this day only unsettled me further, and judging by Jason's lack of jokes, it freaked him out too. For once, even Hilda stayed out of the way. She just let Ruth Flynn take over, and by God did she. Of course, during the horror stories, we drank loads of booze. Lots and lots of booze served to us in glorious pirate era goblets. Ruth made us her most famous concoctions. Not just Bloody Marys either. I mean all kinds of bizarre mixes, and a ton of rum. Even I gave the rum a try, and yeah, it was too strong. I felt nauseous just sniffing it. At least Ruth was kind enough to offer me a few Bud Lights. Around 2 AM, we started getting to the bar's modern history. Jason shivered next to me. I wrapped my arm around him, both out of affection to keep us warm. Well, so how do you and Bradley deal with these hauntings? Hilda asked, her hands flying around in a drunken excitement. I mean, with such horrible history, God, I can only imagine how scared you must be running this place. Yeah, Ruth said. Solemn spirits replacing her enthusiasm. She swallowed the rum in her goblet. Bradley passed away 2 years ago. Oh my God, Hilda said. Stunned into silence, me and Jason watched Ruth. The mood of the entire bar shifted from campfire chills to sympathetic sadness. Struggling to restrain her emotions, Ruth confronted us. The smile was gone. Even her pirate outfit had lost goofy luster. The flamboyant costume may as well have been a black funeral garb. Bradley helped me all those years ago, you know. A weak smile crossed her lips. I even made him wear a costume. He hated it at first, but over time, the boy loved it. Oh, he did. Lost in the nostalgia, Ruth gestured all around her costume. The eye patch, the hat. She let out a brief chuckle. And the red vest like me. He looked so swell in it, he really did. She choked up for a moment. Her quick sip of rum confronted the nerves. I bet he did, the sympathetic Hilda said. Memories overflowing her, Ruth motioned towards her leg. I even gave him a cane, his grandma's old cane. Pure maple wood it was. I told him it was to use as a peg leg, and he did. I could always hear Bradley stumbling around in the kitchen with it. Her warm laugh brought a welcome to the end of the tension. All of us joined in on the laughter. I had him scare the rowdier customers, Ruth went on. You see, everyone knew how haunted the pirate's house was, and everyone knew about Bruce Jode. They was also scared of his evil spirit. So around closing time, when we had some scragglers and drunks all getting rowdy, well, I had Bradley stay in the shadows. Grinning, Hilda raised her glass. Oh, I get it. Yeah, Hilda took a long swig. Bradley would scare the bejesus out those boys and girls, Ruth went on. He'd scare them so bad they'd never come back. Letting out an amused crackle, she pointed towards the curtain. They'd hear that peg leg coming from there, and they'd run like hell. Ruth's accent sounded stronger than ever. The gentle southern tone had become more confident, more boisterous. Then again, maybe it was a rum talking. Her movements were clumsy with drunkenness. Hilda leaned closer towards Ruth. But you've actually seen things here, right? Like real spirits? Ruth gave a confident smirk. That's what we all want to know, Jason added. Oh yes, Ruth said, many spirits. Like Bruce Jode? Hilda inquired. Ruth nodded. She raised a goblet to her lips, among many others. She took a quick sip of the precious booze. I could tell her eyes were alive with passion. The rum had awakened many emotions within her, fiery emotions. So Bruce Jode's ghost does haunt this bar, Hilda said. The thought freaked me out. Scared, I felt my hands were frozen to the camera. Yeah, Ruth answered, every single night. Wow, Hilda responded. She stood up and got ready to go towards the back curtain. Maybe you can give us a tour of the back. With startling quickness, Ruth snatched Hilda's wrists. No, Ruth replied. Her tone lost its warmth. Instead, it sounded harsh, hell-bent even. Uneasy, Hilda tried to pull away from Ruth's tight grasp. But for someone so old, Hilda had strength. What kind of muscle was the costume hiding? Well, it's just part of the show, Hilda stammered. You give us a tour. Ruth's grip tightened, making Hilda cringe with pain. I want my son, Ruth demanded. With those cold words, several candle flames flickered out, as if Ruth's harsh accent had quashed them. Now we were in an even darker pirate ship. He comes to see me at night, Ruth continued. He comes here at night. Terrified, all three of us stared at her. Even Hilda was speechless. He died here, Ruth said, anguished. My Bradley died in this bar, and he never left. He comes to see me, he talks to me. Hilda stared at her uneasy. Ruth, I don't understand. Bradley comes back, Ruth yelled. Her eyes had sharp focus, just like her voice. He comes to see me. Jesus, I heard Jason say. Ruth snatched Hilda's shoulder. I know he'll be here with y'all soon. He likes guests, he always does. Me and Hilda exchanged an uneasy eye contact. Hilda was used to being the one pushing for ghosts. Now we're in uncharted territory. I just want y'all to stay here with me, Ruth went on, until Bradley comes here. Silent, Hilda looked right into her desperate eyes. Please, Ruth begged, please stay with me. Before Hilda could say anything, I leaned a little closer. But what about Bruce Jode? I asked, doing my best to keep my voice steady. What if he shows up instead? Ruth turned a focused gaze towards me. Sometimes he does. Letting go of Hilda, she looked at the host. But I don't want to be alone if he does. We gave in to Ruth's demands. We stayed in the bar and drank, but there wasn't much talk. Soon, 2:30 turned to 2:45, and 3 AM got closer and closer. According to Ruth, 3 AM was usually closing time, and it was usually when the pirate's house spirits came alive. During the wait, me and Hilda had fiddled with some of her equipment. The heat thermometer didn't really matter. How do you get chill spots when the bar is freezing? We saw nothing on the infrared camera either. All in all, we had just had Ruth's word the place was haunted, but I was convinced. I drank more beer while everyone downed more rum. Our eyes strayed up to a pirate's clock. Suspense mounted with each passing second. Finally, 3 AM was upon us. We'd hit the witching hour. Hilda finished her rum like a pro. Well, it's time, boys and girls. Confident, Ruth gave us a smug smile. Yes, it is. I felt a breeze whip through the room. Even the windows all closed. The breeze felt like it was coming from the ocean. The sheer force sent me shivers. And soon, the breeze sent all the candles out like a quick burst. Now our ship had gotten darker. "Ah, God," Jason yelled. "Just remain calm," Hilda said. "Allow it," Jason restored. Ruth's adamant shush silenced them both. Intense, Ruth pointed towards a curtain. "Do you hear that?" We listened, and instantly, I wish I hadn't. But then again, I'd have heard that chilling noise at some point. Echoing from the back of the room was a slow, steady pounding on the wooden floor, like an incessant rhythm. The hits sounded louder, closer, more ferocious with each hit. And then they were steadier, with a ticking clock, stronger than the thud of a heavy foot, or a wooden foot, stronger than a peg leg. "Jesus Christ," Hilda muttered. "Listen," Ruth commanded us. Making the floorboard groan upon impact, the thuds got closer and closer to the curtain. Then they stopped. Silence engulfed into the darkness. We were alone at the bar, too scared to say anything, almost too scared to breathe. Jason glared at Ruth. "Is this some kind of joke?" My Bud Light exploded, not in a spontaneous explosion, but with the force of someone squeezing it in a burst of rage. Shattered glass flew everywhere. Beer flowed all down the counter like flowing blood. Frightened, everyone staggered back. I heard Jason drop the boom mic, and his stool scraped across the floor in a most agonizing screech. Scared, I looked over at Ruth. "What the hell was that?" "It's Bradley," Ruth said in her soft southern accent. She gave us a sly smile. "He's coming." I could see how calm Ruth was. She was used to this activity. She even looked happy, like a kid hearing an ice cream truck coming from down the road. Then we heard the thuds once more. Consistent bangs of a peg leg on the wooden floor, full some more booming creaks. Me, Hilda and Jason faced the curtain in fear. Thuds were coming from right behind it. Ruth flashed a beam grin. "I know that's my boy." A harsh wind brushed against the curtain. Even in the cold bar, I felt beads of sweat slide down my head. I could feel myself tremble. I felt nothing but fear. "It's Bradley," Ruth proclaimed. Hilda looked at Ruth. "How'd you know?" A guttural groan echoed towards us, a groan of anger, of wrath. To our horror, we turned to see a tall man emerge through the curtains. In lumbering steps, he made his way towards the bar. All the while, the steady thud smashed into the floorboards. I heard Jason yell in fright. Amidst the darkness, the figure approached us. He was propped up by a wooden leg, his black hair masked by a tall black hat. "Bradley!" Ruth cried. I looked at Ruth and saw her calm, comforted expression. Her warm eyes looked right at the mysterious man. She wasn't scared in the slightest. She was relieved. "Bradley, baby," Ruth went on. The man stood about 10 feet away. He leaned on his wooden leg. In the darkness, one of his arms looked long and slender-like. The man stood about 10 feet away. He leaned on his wooden leg. In the darkness, one of his arms looked long and slender, like a tree branch sticking out. But I knew better. The glistening was silver in the light and made it clear he was holding a long sword. A long, sharp antique sword. One fitting for the most fearsome pirates in the 7 seas. Excited, Ruth stepped towards the armed man. "Come here! Come here to Mama, Bradley!" "Ruth!" Hilda yelled. Turning, Ruth smiled at us. "It's okay, it's just Bradley." I watched the man raise his sword. I couldn't let the old sweet lady run into him. the equivalent of letting an innocent puppy run straight into oncoming traffic. Panicking, I ran towards her. Ruth! No! I heard Jason scream. Alice! I heard Jason and Hilda's scared footsteps crush the creaking floorboards as they followed me all the way to Ruth. Ruth caressed the man's face. Hey there, Bradley. This isn't Bradley, I yelled at Ruth. Going off adrenaline, I pushed her away from the tall man. Get away from him! That's Bruce Jode! Up closer, I could make out the man's features. The eye patch, the old bloodstains on the sword, the red vest. His costume was cartoony like Ruth's. All that was missing was a fake-ass parrot. The man's face was pale and blank. He looked young, innocent except for that harsh, glowering eye. The Jode eye. What are you talking about? Ruth yelled at me. I faced her. Ruth's face was irate, all her southern manners decimated by southern anger. She looked like she was so angry. Leave my son alone, she held at me. Jason grabbed Ruth's arm. That's not a little boy, lady. Outraged, Ruth yanked her arm back. What are you talking about? That's my Bradley. Her eyes gazed down to the man's peg leg. Ruth crackled in maniacal glee. Don't you think I know my own son? Hilda stopped right before me. Come on, let's go. As she followed my gaze, Hilda's terrified voice died in an instant. That's goddamn Bruce Jode, I heard Jason yell at Ruth. But he was wrong, and Ruth was right. Bruce Jode had a real peg leg. He wouldn't be leaning on a wooden cane. Not the cane Ruth gave her son many years ago. Horror latched itself onto me. Even wearing what I now realised a skin-tight costume, Bradley wasn't a little boy any longer. He was a living, breathing grown man, and he'd been in this bar the whole goddamn time. Hey lady, come on! The oblivious Jason continued with Ruth. Turning, I made eye contact with Ruth. She gave me a cold, knowing smile. Get them, son, she commanded Bradley. Get those scoundrels now. Oh no, Jason cried. Jason looked right into my fearful eyes. Then he saw the cane in the man's hand. Bradley's cane. Kill 'em all, Ruth hollered with sadistic satisfaction. With the quickness of youth, Bradley raised the sword, his movement so swift and fast. Terrified, I faced Ruth's son. He was pulsating with life, no bloodstains on him, no wounds. He was alive, a 20-something monster. Alice! Hilda cried. Bradley lowered the blade straight towards my vulnerable skull. I felt a strong shove push me into Hilda's worried arms. The crushing sound of the blade striking flesh disturbed me, like the sound of a crushed skull, or the unsettling final gasp of someone's dying breath. Me and Hila looked at the sword sticking out the top of Jason's head. The same Jason who'd been so scared the whole night. Yet this same man was the same boyfriend who had just saved me by sacrificing himself. The sword stuck out of Jason's head like a grotesque antenna. Thankfully, he was too weak with fleeting life to turn around. I didn't want to look into his fading eyes. I couldn't. Finish him, boy, Ruth yelled at Bradley. She reached over and slapped him. Punish the vermin. Do it for us. For the pirate's house. Petrified in fear, I stared at Jason as he stood upright. Bradley's exposed eye marked me like his sword's blade. Tears slid down my face. No, I said. One harsh yank and Bradley pulled the sword straight out of Jason. It's our family business, Ruth reminded Bradley. Protect it. Jason hit the floor hard. The floorboards let out a vicious creak upon impact, like spilled drinks. I'm sorry, Hilda told me. Alice, let's go, please. I felt her tug my arm. I couldn't move. To this day, I still don't know how I held onto the camera. I felt life fleeing me without so much of a cut or a bruise, without enduring the wrath of Bradley's sword. Get them, Ruth screamed. At his mother's command, Bradley raised the long sword and marched towards us. All the while, Bradley got closer and closer, his steps more determined and frantic. God damn, Alice, run! I heard Hilda yell in my ear. And using all her might, Hilda pushed me towards the pirate's house front door. She pulled hard, like a panicking horse dragging an empty stagecoach. Snapping at my melancholy, I turned and saw Hilda lead us closer to the door. Then I matched her intense speed and panic. Loot them, I heard Ruth scream. Right as Hilda shoved the door open, I turned and stole a look back. Now Bradley was running, saddled by a cane and child's costume. He was so fast. He wasn't on his peg leg either. He had no reason to play Bruce Jode. He was Bradley Flynn, a madman at his mum's command. I could hear his intense breathing echo through the cold room, and I was damn sure that the glowering eye was focusing on me. Bradley let out a vicious cry. Not again! Ah! Just that same guttural groan he unleashed earlier, a growl of a disturbed pirate. Terrified, me and Hilda rushed out into the November night. Even in the sub 50 degree weather, it felt like a summery day compared to the drafty pirate ship we just abandoned. The sidewalks were empty. Right now, a dead time for tourists. 3 AM. Thanksgiving morning, just our luck. Bradley's cries erupted through the silent streets. A deafening tap on his cane now smashed onto the concrete rather than wooden floorboards. Trembling with fear, I turned to see him rush after us. "Go!" Hilda screamed at me. "Run!" Clinging onto my hand, she led us past all the closed bars and gift shops. I'd never seen Hila run so fast before. Then again, she stayed in good shape for the camera. Bradley's yells and taps began to fade off into the distance. I glanced back one last time. Bradley remained outside the pirate's house front entrance, like a deranged pirate mascot brought to horrifying life. Apparently, he didn't want to leave his mum's side. The further me and Hilda got from the pirate's house, the more this horrifying reality set in. How long had Ruth been keeping her supposedly dead son back there? Why had she lied to us about him? And why did she make him keep wearing that costume? 10 minutes later, we finally got to the police. They didn't take us serious. But what else did they have to do on Thanksgiving morning? I handed them my camera, and we led them right to the bar. As soon as we got there, I knew something was off. There was 21st century consumerism written all over the place. From the pirates' caricatures, and the swinging sign on the window. You can't sell out in less than 30 minutes, I realised. It's not possible. The doors were locked. The police refused to break it down, so we had to call the owner. She arrived soon enough, half asleep and grumpy. But she wasn't Ruth. Hell, she was half Ruth's age. And the girl wasn't even Southern. A New York transplant, just like Hilda. She said she never responded to our email, and she said she would sure have never let us come in on Thanksgiving. Nonetheless, we convinced the owner to let us inside. And well, things got weirder. Gone was Hilda's ghost haunting equipment, gone were our drinks, and gone was Jason. In fact, no blood was anywhere, no sign of any crimes, and no sign of the violent mother of son Jiro we had just encountered. Rather than a pirate ship, we were on a spaceship, speakers, flat screens, and even a pirate video game was inside. No candles or lanterns, no sword display, only a few Jolly Rogers. Even the crow's nest was gone. We were back in 2018 again. We may as well have been in a Buffalo Wild Wings, rather than one of the oldest taverns in the southeast. Needless to say, the police found nothing in the back room, or in the kitchen. They just said we were too drunk to know what was going on. Desperate, me and Hilda did all we could to get the police to keep investigating. They said they'd take a look at my footage, and that was it. And to this day, I haven't heard back from them. After the cops left, me and Hilda lingered around with the owner. It turns out she wasn't as bad as I thought, just not a morning person. She even gave us a couple of drinks on the house. However, we politely declined the rum. And there in the darkness at 6 AM on Thanksgiving morning, the three of us chatted like old friends, without the camera and the sound worries. It was nice to just have a normal conversation in the bar. There was no need to press for the stories or lore, no need to get scared or hope for a ghost to appear, just three girls talking in the pirate's house. There was something romantic about it all, the kind of camaraderie that made Hilda's haunted happy hour fun in the first place. Soon the owner wanted to tell us something secret. She even leaned closer to share it in a voice that sounded softer than Ruth's, a notch above a whisper. There in the darkness, she told us the scariest story we'd heard yet. Not so much a legend, as one of Savannah's many dark secrets. The story of the pirate's house owners back in the 1940s, a single mother and her son, Ruth and Bradley Flynn. They ran the bar themselves, and yes, they both dressed as pirates. As the boy grew older, Ruth still forced him to wear that outfit, the eye patch, the wooden cane, everything. Worst of all, rather than just scare away their scraggler customers, the mother and son got addicted to killing, and their easiest targets came around closing time, around 3 AM. Whoever was left at the pirate's house during the witching hour was never seen again. That much is true. What happened to them? Asked the owner. My nervous hands gripped my long neck. I shivered in the dark room, and it wasn't just from the cold beer either. What happened to the Flynns? They were cool, but the public never knew anything, the owner told us. Why? Tourism, the owner smiled. This was the 1940s, you know. Ghost tours weren't an industry then. And now we're never supposed to tell anyone, an incredulous Hilda asked. The owner took a shot. Well, you can. She slammed the glass down like a gavel. But who's going to believe you? Me and Hilda exchanged nervous looks, helpless looks. The police didn't, the owner went on, her tone sly yet morbid. And do you actually think they're going to give you those tapes back? And the owner had a point. The booze and her candid comfort were just a temporary distraction from the anguished pain I felt within, a pain I felt over Jason. I quit the show the very next day. If you want to call it quitting, Hilda had no interest in continuing either. Nobody would. And we never got my camera back. The Thanksgiving special never happened, and to this day, our Pirate's House footage has never been released. But I still think about Jason, quite often actually, and every time I do, I bawl like a scared child. He deserved a better fate, and I still refuse to let him die in vain. That's why I'm telling you now who his real killers were, and how they can be found. And how if you ever want a drink in Savannah, Georgia, whether you're a beer drinker like me, or someone who likes the harder stuff, avoid the Pirate's House at all costs, especially around 3 AM, and especially if you're greeted by a friendly old southern woman wearing a pirate's costume.
Man in the Forest by Hayden M. For reference, I'm a female in my late 20s, and about a week ago, I had an unsettling encounter. The city I lived in is surrounded by reserved land, set aside by the city planners. This is a forest full of pine trees. Now I usually walk my dog up in the area closest to me, which is about a 10-minute walk from the middle of town. It's one of my favourite places to go, but I'm nervous about going in the area alone. The city is usually very safe. I've never had any concerns out by myself, even in the dark. And I've been in the forest when it's dark many times without incident. The track where I access the forest is atop of a dead-end street, through a park with a playground, up a long series of steps, rather secluded. I have 2 dogs, an older one and a 1-year-old one. They're a working breed, so very high energy, although the older one is now arthritic and doesn't need much exercise, but the younger one needs a huge amount of off-leash exercise daily, which is why I was out on this particular evening. The older dog is very shy and has a nervous disposition. Now during the time of this, it was after work in winter, so the sun is down. It was also bad weather, nearly a storm, and raining, although the trees shelter you from most of the rain. Now I get into the forest and let my dogs off of the leash. We meet a couple of other people also with high energy dogs along the way. Now I'm walking along where one of my tracks leads, and I can see a man up ahead sitting in a seat. I could see he's dressed dark, with blue track pants and a leather jacket over a hooded jersey, head down staring at the ground. His hood was up and I couldn't see his face. He was just sitting there in the rain, and I immediately get bad vibes from him. I tried to shake it off as just someone out for a walk, but decided to stay alert just in case. A few minutes after, the older dog looked back at something behind me, then bolted, clearly scared, running in the direction of the playground. I've never seen her run away like this before, and the younger dog runs after her. I yelled for her to come back, but she's gone. The younger one comes back when I call, but keeps running up ahead, like he can't decide who to go with. That's when I look behind me. I see the same man a little further behind me. I start to get really nervous about the man, but more about my dog this ran. The track I'm on makes a large loop before heading back to the playground area, with the track below led straight behind him, so I quickly climbed down back onto the lower track, hurrying after my dog. Now I'm really scared at this point. The track is muddy and slippery. It's now dark and very slow going. Now when I get close to these steps, I see both dogs sitting there, and they come running up very excited to see me. Relieved. I turn around and the man is right behind me. He had to run or have followed me down the bank to get there as quickly as he did. I realised that I really need to get back to a populated area as I head down the steps as fast as my back will let me. When I get to the bottom of the steps, I put the dog back on the leash when the younger dog starts growling at me for the first time. The man is now halfway down the steps when he sees me, suddenly stops and proceeds to tie a shoelace. I keep looking at him with my dog growling. He shoots me a long, angry look. Then he turns around and walks back up the steps into the darkness of the forest. Now nothing bad actually happened, but I hate to think of what could have if my dogs were not with me. The weirdest thing that ever happened to me when I was in a forest was when I used to go hunting. I used to love doing this. I lived about 5 miles away from a very large forest that had very good game there. Now one trip changed that for me forever. I remember the night well. Everything was going good. I was about to pack up for the day when I hear what sounds like a woman screaming for help. I'm armed, so not too worried to go and find out what's wrong. Now I'm constantly trying to track the source of the sound. It sounds as though it's moving, and I realise it's in a very dense part of the forest that I never would normally go to. I shine my flashlight correctly for 1 second to the exact source, and it terrified me. I can see it's a man running with a tape recorder, and God knows how many else were there with him. I fired a warning shot into the air and bolted it back, and never went back to that area again. Last week, I was driving back home from my grandmother's birthday party. My family lives close enough to each other, but 5 hours away from me. So my plan had been to spend the night and leave the following day around lunch. But then, I get into a fight with my brother, the worst ever. My parents took his side, as always, and I decided to go ahead and go anyway. It was about 10 at night when I left the house, and by midnight, I'm regretting the decision. It's a long drive through the woods and I'm so tired. I'd have considered stopping by a motel, but there were very few bars between the long stretches of wooded roads, and I didn't think there was a single place to stay that entire journey. I was on the longest, darkest road that actually stretched for hundreds of miles without the sign of another person, other than the occasional closed country store. I began toying with the idea of just parking, taking a nap as my fatigue worsened. When I woken up starting to veer, I knew it was a necessity. I decided I would stop to sleep, but only when I reached the next semi-populated spot in the road. I knew the tricks to stay awake, I rolled down the window, singing along to the radio. I rolled the window back up, cranking up the air, slapping myself hard. Enough to make my face tingle. The thing is, these are all half measures. What's a full measure then? They're sandbags against a rising tide of sleep, meant to delay the inevitable for a few minutes. Getting out of the car, caffeine, and actual sleep. These are the only things I knew that could really roll things back once you're truly on the edge. I had no caffeinated drinks with me. I had no idea of how many more miles it would be before I would see another streetlight again. But rightly, or wrongly, if I was going to sleep in my car, I wanted to at least have some suggestion of civilization around me. So, that left getting out of the car and walking around. I didn't love the idea of stopping at night on some dark and lonely country road, which seems a better option than risking a wreck when I finally fell asleep for a second too long. The part of the road I'm on was winding, having very thick trees around me that are ancient. It's nearly a full moon. The shadows of the branches are fierce. I drive on, looking for a straighter, brighter patch of road, but none come. And with each mile, I felt myself drifting deeper into a deep sleep. Muttering under my breath, I pull the car over on a semi-straight section of road that's maybe 100 feet long before it snakes off in new directions. I hit my emergency lights, hoping to be able to keep any late night drunk drivers from ploughing into me. The air's colder than I expected, even for October. Colder than it has seemed to be when I rolled down the window earlier. It's weird. I was half asleep and didn't necessarily trust logic at that moment. I moved in front of my car and began walking in a circle within the glow from my headlights before transitioning to jumping jacks. I know I look stupid, but a glance at my surroundings makes it clear there was no one around. Aside from my car's lights, the only source of illumination was the intermittent glow of the moonlight from above the rustling trees. The only sound aside from those shivering leaves was the low purr of my car's engine and my own puffing breaths as I went through my midnight calisthenics routine. But then, I heard something else. I stopped at the noise and listened, but there's nothing. A few seconds passes by. I decided it's a figure of my imagination and was about to head back to the car when I hear it again. It was rustling, not the cry of some bird, but the high, clear notes of some unfamiliar tune. My skin began to prickle as a low buzz of fear jolted the music in my ears. It went on for at least 10 seconds before stopping, and it was enough for me to tell it was not a recording or some scrap from a distant radio carried to me on the tide of nighttime air. No, someone or something was definitely making that sound, and they're very close. Trying to keep myself from breaking into a panic run, I went back to my car, pulled the handle. The door was locked. I had locked it as a precaution when I got out because I had imagined that Someone was gonna sneak in the back seat while I was outside with my back turned. The irony wasn't lost on me now, but my main focus was on getting my key and unlocking that door. I fumbled desperately in my pocket as the whistling started up again for a few moments. Much closer this time. It seemed like a different part of the same song, though I couldn't say for sure. I yanked the keys from my pocket and started jabbing it shakily at the lock when I heard my car's engine shudder to a stop. A small whine of terror escapes me as I tried to find the lock. Successfully now, turning the key. I froze as the whistle began for a third time, now directly behind me. I could smell something now, a mixture of several strong smells like someone was mixing cinnamon, garlic and rotten tomatoes in some kind of broth. I gagged slightly and was readying myself to yank the door open, and the whistling stops again. The smell, now stronger. Then I feel a small, burning kiss on the back of my neck. The next few seconds were a panicked blur. I yanked open the door, getting in, slamming it shut without daring to look out to see what might be looking in at me. Locking the door with one hand, I cranked the car with the other. I almost cried with relief when it came back to life immediately. I thought I heard like scratching at my windows as I threw the car into drive, speeding off into the night. I had no trouble with drowsiness the rest of my drive home. It wasn't until the next evening that I fell into an exhausted sleep. I had no explanation for what happened on the road. As the days have passed, I found myself questioning my rationalization of the situation as more of kind of walking in a dream or a false memory brought upon by my brief moments of sleep as I drove home that night. But then, last night, I woke up to a terrible smell in my room. It smelled of garlic and cinnamon and sulfur. I sit up in my bed, my eyes wide, my heart hammering as I stared into the dark. Then, I hear it, the whistling coming from underneath my bed. I know sulfur's a sign of demons. I bolted, running to the next door in my underwear, hammering on my neighbour's door until they waverly agreed to call the cops. When they come in, there's no sign of anything, not even of a break-in. No trace anyone was there. And for the most part, they're correct. When I returned home in the early hours of the morning, I did my own search for signs that some person had been there. At first, I see nothing, but then I look more closely under my bed. There is a minuscule amount of dirt there. Strange greenish grey colour. Mixed in with the dirt was some dried skin, as though something was molten. Now I don't know if I'll ever have another chance to write this down, so I'm taking this time to do it immediately. I don't know what this was, or why it followed me home. I just pray it is all a figure of my imagination, and nothing truly evil or twisted like a demonic presence or something dark. It's haunted me to this day. Every time a tree casts its shadow over me, I'm terrified.
My name is John. When I was a kid, I lived in a little town in Michigan with a group of friends whom I saw on a nightly basis. Our summer days were packed with adventure, sports, and all-round fun. However, things in that town just weren't right sometimes. This is the story of a wooded area just behind my house, and what we found within them. My backyard was large, and behind us there was a relatively large wooded area. A hike through the woods from my backyard out to the other side where the busy road would cut through them would take you about 10 minutes. Of course, if you walked one direction long enough, it would take you to the busy road, so there was never a threat of getting lost. But many rumours surrounded the woods. Tales mostly cooked up by the kids in our middle school, but that didn't make living right in front of them any easier. My backyard scared me at night, probably even more than my basement did. It wasn't always that way though. I used to explore these woods fearlessly and eagerly, my sense of adventure always burning brightly. However, I started to see things back there. Little things that were probably just animals, but that's not where this story begins. It begins with the man in the hat. The man in the hat showed up on a night like any other. It was a hot summer night, and a few of us were out skateboarding in Jimmy's driveway. It was Jimmy, Rochelle, Claude and I that night. Steve-O was grounded, and Sammy and Cody were playing a video game, claiming it was too humid out. So the four of us were skating outside, the night young. It was around 9 o'clock, and the sun was just about all the way down. The streetlights bestowed us with enough sight that we were still grinding on Jimmy's new rail. We'd been skating since after dinner. When we started talking about the deep woods, the name assigned to the woods behind my house by the local kids, we started telling stories that we'd heard at school, and I guess Rochelle was feeling pretty bold. "You guys want to go to the woods?" Rochelle asked, a sly smile on her face. Truth was, it sounded like a blast. We were all really good at scaring each other, and getting hyped up. It was pretty much immediately unanimous. Claude had to prove how much of a man he was to everyone, and Jimmy was down if I was. So we helped Jimmy put his rails and ramps away before putting all our balls in his garage and headed for the deep woods. I opened my gate and closed it behind everyone. "John, go grab your flashlight," Jimmy said, turning to wait for me. I nodded and hurried back around the side of my house to the garage and made my way past the bikes to the old cabinet where everything was kept. After finding the flashlight, I hurried back to find Claude and Rochelle already over the fence. Jimmy was patiently waiting near the fence for me. I jogged across the backyard. Jimmy, after spotting me, climbed in the fence and hopped over. I tossed the flashlight over the fence and jammed my right foot into the chain link fence, pulling myself up and over it, careful not to snag my clothes on the top where the wires were twisted into Ys. I dropped down and Jimmy handed me the flashlight, which I promptly turned on and washed it over Rochelle and Claude, both of them with wild excited eyes. This may come as a shock to you, but we actually hadn't done this before, creeping through the deep woods at night. With all the rumours that floated around it, you'd have to be crazy not to be a little scared, and we were like only 10 or 11 years old at the time, so we believed a lot of the stuff we were told, and we probably shouldn't have. I may not have been so scared if my parents were nonchalant about the woods, but even they expressed a bit of caution about them. The fact was, while none of us had brought it up before, I think we all secretly wanted to do this at some point. So here we were. The pall of darkness that smothered the world around us. Only my flashlight to pierce through it. The four of us moved together deeper into the woods, occasionally jumping at the sudden movement of an animal. There were frequent shushes, and did you hear that? Floating around as we went. The flashlight traded hands often, each of us sticking close together. Claude, of course, had to be cool, and he decided to put some distance between himself and the group, gaining a steady lead on us. I remember at this point, Rochelle, whom held the flashlight, flicked it off for a second and screamed, which caused Claude to slam into us full speed. He managed to take Jimmy and I down with him, Rochelle illuminating us with a light. We all laughed hysterically at him for a good couple of minutes before getting back to our feet. Admittedly, I jumped too, but no one had to know that. Claude, now sticking close to us, grumbling the whole way, we wandered around until we noticed headlights, and the ground turned soft from soil to cracked pavement. "Yeah, I guess that's it," I said solemnly. I had never wished the woods were larger until now. but we're having a great time. And that's when she said it. Why can't we keep going? I turned around and looked across the road. It was true. The woods extended further on the other side of the road, and they were even thicker, more matured. The trees were higher and the depths were darker. The tree line suddenly put me on edge. I don't know why, but I did. Yeah, Claude blurted out in agreement with Rochelle. Jimmy looked at me. Although Rochelle was holding the flashlight, the look on his face was clear. He was very uncertain about it. He looked towards the woods, and then back at me. I'm down if you are, he said, extending his fist for the secret handshake. I chuckled and shook my head before performing the secret handshake, and turning towards the road. Alright, I firmly stated. It's settled then. Claude bounded forward like a happy dog, the three of us hot on his heels as we ventured across the way. Into these new woods, the feel kind of changed. I went from happy and carefree to a nervous and paranoid kid. The shift was sudden and unexplainable. We moved together through the brush, the grass much higher in these woods. What if these are deep woods? Jimmy asked as we walked. What if the rumours are true, and they're all about these woods, not the ones back there? I swallowed. I was more on edge than I'd like to admit, and I really wished he hadn't put that thought in my head. Oh, come on now, Claude piped up. I made up some of these rumours myself. We laughed at this, which helped lighten up the feeling a little bit. A few minutes into wandering, I stopped. I was holding the flashlight at this point. Guys, I think we should turn around, I said finally. I don't know how deep these woods go, and I don't want us to get lost at night. Rochelle laughed. That's viable, she responded. Thank God she agreed with me. I knew Jimmy would, and that would make the majority vote. Jimmy, you want to head back? I asked just to be sure. Yeah, he nodded. It's late, another time. Yeah, let's... I stopped short, flashing my light on Claude. He had his back to us, and he appeared to be staring intently into the darkness. Claude! Claude! I repeated, shaking my light around. Claude! Rochelle shouted out to him. What's up, man? Finally, he responded, though quietly. Guys, do you see that? He asked, his voice in a shaky manner that I wasn't used to hearing. Does it look like a person? He tilted his head lower. Claude, come on, games are over, I insisted, not wanting a scare in these unfamiliar woods. You see, in these woods, we felt a lot smaller than when we was in the ones near my house. Suddenly, it felt like there weren't enough of us, and something that I couldn't put my finger on made my hair stand on end. Claude, I called. Who has a freaking flashlight? He asked frantically. Please, for my own peace of mind, just shine it there. He lifted his finger ahead. My head dropped and I sighed. Fine, I stated. If it'll get this out of your system. I lifted the light to the area he indicated, and I froze. It definitely did look like there was a man standing there. I was short for words. I held the flashlight steady, and we all analysed the figure. I don't see it, Jimmy whispered as he took a couple of steps past me. I lifted my finger along his shoulder so he could see down my arm like the scope of a gun. My finger the sight. I handed him the flashlight. Right there, I whispered, outlining the contours of the silhouette with my finger. It looks like he's got a bowler hat on. Jimmy squinted his eyes as he tried to make it out. When finally, whether he did or didn't see it, he nodded. Yeah, I think I see it. Weird, Rochelle commented. You ever stare at something in the dark long enough that it appears to move a little bit? Like you think you see something long enough that it starts to shift around in place, moving more and more the longer you stay fixated on it. And in the morning it was just a coat. Well, has the thing you're fixated on ever shot from its position at breakneck speed and leaps away into the night? No? It has probably never happened to me either until that moment, when all hell broke loose. It moved faster than any man possibly could move, and put the fear of the devil in us. There was screaming, commotion, the flashlight bouncing around, panic, dread, and a sudden urge to escape from the woods no matter what the costs. I hit a couple of trees as I ran, but they didn't deter me. I heard my friends running behind me. But to me in that moment, it was that thing hot on my heels. I hit the pavement and nearly got run over by a car as I darted over the road, followed closely by the rest. I stopped at the tree line to turn around, just in time to see Claude trample over me for a second time tonight, followed by Jimmy and Rochelle, neither of them with my flashlight. We stopped at the tree line panicking and holding each other as we looked back across the road. Jesus Christ, dude! Oh my god, what was that? Did you see how fast it moved? I dropped my flashlight, I'm sorry. So many things said at one time. all with Claude slewing obscenities all over the top of it. We hurried back to my house in the dark and huddled together. It was only a 10-minute walk, but it felt like it was hours. When we finally hit my friend's, we hopped over it and ran back to the safety of the streetlights in front of Jimmy's house. We all sort of just stood there trying to make sense of what we saw, but nobody could arrive at any conclusions. But we had a bigger problem than that. We dropped my flashlight out there. It was an expensive light that my dad had expressively forbade me to use, though I did it all the time anyway. I would have to go back for it, but I never wanted to set foot out there again. I just decided that I would pretend I never touched the flashlight and act clueless about how it went missing. We sat on the curb for the remaining 20 minutes of our night, discussing what we saw before we had to go home. We all saw different things, but there was one thing we could all agree on. It was a man with a hat.
So in kindergarten, I had 3 best friends. There's Jess, Miranda, and then there's Jacelyn. Jacelyn was different from the rest of us. When she got angry, she had to be taken out of the class and brought to a special room, just for kids like her. Now this really confused me at the time, because I was only 5 or 6 and didn't know anything but terrible reasoning. My terrible reasoning come into play when all of our groups were hanging out at my home in the backyard. See, my yard had a wooden fence, but right behind the wooden fence was a wide, vast forest with this huge river system and a few large drops. I love to go there on the rare occasions. Now this happened to be one of them rare occasions. We all snuck out and crawled on our knees into the forest. We could see green and brown sunny blues. It's amazing. So we continue on, spotting a few animals and such. Then we entered a drop. Jess and Miranda were both excited. Looking down, the big drop is questioning. We don't know what's beneath it. I determined the only way was to actually go down there. Now after about 10 minutes of grabbing rocks and climbing down unsteadily, we made it. The area we're in was abnormal. There wasn't a lot of trees or rocks anymore, just dirt and grass and empty logs. Jacelyn started acting weird when we got to the middle of the new area. She was twitchy. I was kinda put off by this. We then saw something even weirder than anything we'd seen before. A deer carcass was being hung. It was not fresh, but still terrifying. Her eyes were wide, looking like it was about to scream. I patted her back, saying it's fine. It was dead and wasn't gonna hurt us. She got shakier, and she was whispering about how it wasn't that was gonna hurt us. Something could hurt the deer. But she was saying it in simple kid words. We walk on. Miranda finds mushrooms. Jess ate a ladybug and some moss because he was hungry. It's all just regular kindergarten kid stuff. But Jacelyn was getting worse the closer we got to wherever we're heading. She was practically unable to move. We walk on though. The last weird thing we saw that day before returning was a single hand tied to a tree. Of course, we're terrified of it, so we run. Running far away, climbing up, then returning home quickly. We all wanted to forget what had happened. However, next week at around 11 PM, something outside woke me up. I peer out of my window, and a small child is coming waddling into the woods, leaving the gate open. I didn't understand the importance of this, so I fall asleep. The following day, Jacelyn wasn't at school. She wasn't the day after, or the week. And eventually, the teacher called the class to the front and told us that Jacelyn had gone missing, and if anyone at all had seen her in the last 3 weeks, to immediately report when and where. But nobody answered. Not even me, who technically had seen her in the night but didn't know how. Over the course of the next 5 months, the police went searching far and wide for Jacelyn, but they never found her, until they questioned me of anywhere she could have been. I told them we had gone into the woods and found a drop once. This got them into the woods with me fast. We found our drop, but they left me at home while they went down there, and when they came back, they never said why they're so quiet. I never really knew what happened until recently. I've been reading through old newspaper articles and ended up finding a 3-day investigation on what happened. Reading through it was the worst part. No, scratch that, the images. It described how they found her, and it was terrifying. The next newspaper had an article about the corpse of a man found in an old woods near the corpse of her. I was shocked as to what had actually done this to her, and when they did testing, they realised it was a man. So, Jacelyn never come out of the woods. That's all I knew for a long time, and I hated what I found when I realised what had actually happened.
My name is Dino, and I live in a small town in Bosnia. I'm 14, and I've never experienced something like this ever before. One day, when I was little, probably about 5, my dad told me, "Son, never go hiking in the forest at night, or without me. You never know what's hiding in the woods." Obviously, I brushed that off, thinking that he just wanted me not to go far away from the house. I should have thought a bit more about what he said. A few weeks ago, my friends invited me to take a hike to the woods at night. They were named Mike, John and Nick. I remembered what my dad told me, but I couldn't refuse. I would seem like a coward in front of my friends, so I decided to do it. Our houses were close to each other, so we snuck out of our houses at around 12:30 AM. We met up at our school's playground, and we started walking towards the woods. It wasn't raining that day, but it was very foggy, which made the walk and hike even creepier. It took us about half an hour to get to the beginning of the woods, and we went deeper. Nothing strange happened for the first mile or so, and then we found the entry to a cave. John said, "Hey, look, it's a cave." "Don't even think about entering it, John," I said. Nick said, "I agree with Dino, we should stay away from that." John laughed. "Cowards." I said, "We're not cowards, John, we just want to be safe." John just told us to screw ourselves and that he's going in, so I just told him it was basically his funeral. He did it. He entered the cave. We waited outside for him for about 5 minutes, and we called out. I shouted to him that this isn't funny and to come back, and Nick did too. I admit it, we were too scared to go in. 10 minutes had passed and John still didn't come out. Nick said he was going in, and I basically just agreed to go with him. We entered the cave. It was very wet and quiet. Even Nick's slight whisper could be heard all the way down. "I can't hear anything. Maybe he's trying to prank us," Nick said. "I don't think so. He wouldn't joke about the situation like that." We got deeper in, and what we saw we can't explain. I don't think you guys will believe this, to be honest. I wouldn't either if someone posted this. We saw a man. He had a black tux covered in blood, blue jeans, and long, dirty hair. He turned around, looking right at us. He looked very tall and skinny. Nick screamed, "What the hell?" The man slowly began walking towards us. We had pocket knives and we pulled them out, letting the man know we were armed. The man was now running at us, while we started running as well. I turned around and kicked the man in the gut as hard as I could. He fell to the ground and hit his head. To be honest, we didn't give a crap about the man, we just wanted to know where John was. While we were running back to the entrance of the cave, we saw John waiting for us. Nick and I climbed back up, and we saw that John had 6 huge cuts in his arms. I screamed, "What the hell happened? Are you okay?" John replied, Did you see the man?" "Well, yeah, of course we did. Did he do this?" "He had a long knife and I tried to get away, but I couldn't," John said. "It's okay, I'm calling an ambulance now," Nick said. "Oh god, no signal." Nick and I carried John out of the woods, and then Nick called the ambulance. We waited for about 10 minutes for the ambulance to arrive, and they carried Nick to the hospital. We obviously couldn't leave him, so Nick and I went with him. John recovered after a few days, physically and mentally. I'm just happy that we're still alive. And that's about it. Nothing's happened since. None of us went into the woods again. We're still best friends, but I'm still mad at John for making that stupid decision. If we ever go back into those woods, I'll make an update post. You can contact me privately on Reddit DMs, or ask a question in the comments. I really just want to know what you guys think it was, and why that man was in there, and what he wanted to do to us.
I've been going to college here in Washington State for 2 full semesters before I finally decided to join a fraternity. I'm not a party animal or anything, but the stories I've heard about a particular fraternity's parties were enough to convince me that I had to take part. Now, initiation week was exactly what you'd expect. They made us stay up for several nights, eat raw sardines, what the hell, stuff like that. The crowning moment of initiation was that each initiate had to spend the night in the so-called murder forest outside the city, famous for being haunted. Apparently, several serial killer victims were found there. On top of that, people heard weird sounds and screaming. I figured that the stories had been exaggerated to enhance our experience. So, the 6 of the other initiates and I hopped into vans and driven to the edge of the forest. One of the older members told us that we should walk for about an hour along a path, and that we'd find a campsite where we could spend the night. Each of us was carrying a backpack with a sleeping bag to lay on. I've been walking with some people in the group for 45 minutes when an idea crosses my mind. The rules we had been given said that we had to spend the night in the forest, not that we had to spend it in a particular area. They wanted us at the campsite so they could come in the morning and mess with us. I have no doubt of this. So I decided to set off into the woods by myself to avoid that hassle sleeping in the designated camping site would bring. I congratulate myself for being smart. Thinking I've avoided trouble, turns out I was wrong. I walked for another 15 minutes or so alone, lighting my way with a flashlight. I recorded some footage of me walking. I found a nice secluded spot with a clearing. I looked around and saw it was completely empty, so I set up my tarp, laying out my sleeping bag. The forest was alive with the sounds of crickets, birds and wind. I lay down in my sleeping bag satisfied, flipping off this light. The forest falls silent. I don't mean to say that the wind lulled, or that there was a momentary lapse in crickets. I mean, that everything that could make a sound stopped at once. It's so sudden and so complete that I thought I'd gone deaf. I pulled my hand up to my ears. When I rub my fingers against them, I hear rustling. I look around into the pitch black darkness, but a layer of thick clouds makes nearly any light surrounding the area impossible to penetrate. I was fumbling for my flashlight when I felt it. There's a warm breath on the back of my neck, like a person is standing inches away, breathing slowly. It stood in stark contrast to the chilly early spring air I'd been adjusted to. My hand found a flashlight, and I spun around, illuminating the clearing behind me, revealing nothing but grass and trees. The instant my light turned on, the forest sound returns. I stand there, alone. I'm trying to psych myself up to go out. All the stories I've heard must have been getting to my head, but I couldn't explain the silence. I resolved to stay the night. I lay back down with the light and finally turn it off, half expecting the forest sound to go with it, but thankfully, the crickets and wind are constant now. I laid in the darkness for a while trying to relax my heart rate enough to sleep. After what must have been half an hour, I finally drift off. Now I don't know how much time has passed, but I'm awoken by a new sound. It's a rhythmic, heavy breathing, occasionally broken by mumbling. The sound was coming in front of my sleeping bag and high above me, probably some 30 feet away. I'm now panicking. I take a picture and see that there's a figure staring at me. She had long hair covering her face, skin appearing torn. The image was flashed and burned into my mind. I kick out of my sleeping bag and bolt it in my bare feet. I can't hear commotion or any sounds behind me, but I don't stop running until I get back. I was terrified. I grilled the members of the fraternity after I get back, but they swore they had nothing to do with it. I had been right about them scaring other members, but they used air horns and guns with blanks to scare them. I guess it's impossible. But no, they could have been behind it. I can't see how they could have made the forest silent though, or breathed on the back of my neck with no one else around.
I'd say I was 6, maybe 7, and it was midday, fairly bright out too. I was sitting on my uncle's lap. We were out and sitting on a lawn chair. Note that this is an extremely wooded area, crammed with trees. We sit, talking and just looking around and enjoying the weather. And that was when I noticed something moving out the corner of my eye. Me, being the naturally curious child I was, I turned my head quickly to get a good look at the thing. I squinted my eyes. From what I could tell, it was extremely tall, and I mean tall. My height guess would be maybe 12 feet tall, but then again, it was a decent distance away, so I couldn't get an exact idea. But what I did know is that it was skinny and a bony creature. Its joints bulged out enough for me to even tell from where I was sitting. It was shaped somewhat like a person, so it was standing on 2 legs, but its limbs and everything were abnormal to it, and it wasn't wearing any clothes. But that's the thing, the creature didn't have any genitals. It was just really weird. I mean, even 6-year-old me knew this, but I wasn't scared in the slightest. Matter of fact, I tried squirming out of my uncle's arms, pointing at the creature, asking him to let me go and see it. He laughed, and while looking in its direction said, "He kind of looks like you, doesn't he?" I furrowed my eyebrows. What's that supposed to mean? I was extremely skinny at the time, never ate much. I, however, knew for a fact that this looked nothing like me, and he clearly couldn't see the tall looming figure slowly making its way across. This made me angrier, and I squirmed more that he wasn't letting me run to it. Tiny me eventually gave up, and I just watched the thing slowly walk across into another patch of cluttered trees, where he disappeared off into them. My uncle never brought up the experience again, and neither did I. This happened long ago, but I know what I saw, whatever it was. It's still a vibrant memory in my mind. My childhood was strange. I have other weird experiences, but I decided to start with first. To this day, I wish I could have chased it. I don't know why, but I had an overwhelming urge to run to it. Maybe then I would understand. Childhood is strange, but I think mine sits in the special category. I've always had weird stuff happen to me, or be around when it happens to others, and at this point I'd almost consider it just me having terrible luck. I've told many people about this story, and they just always say, "Oh, you were too young to really know for sure what it was." It must have been a mistake though, surely. I mean, my uncle even saw it.
My friends and I stayed at this cabin up in the Rocky Mountains. It got ugly real fast. My friend's co-worker told him about this place and said that years and years ago it was owned by some dude who lived in another state. I think it was another one of the four corner states, Utah or Arizona maybe. I guess a guy would rent out the cabin every so often for some extra income or something. The stories about this place were spooky, yeah. We're being stupid and reckless, but above all, curious. We decided it would be an awesome place to do some ghost hunting. The co-worker warned us against trying to open the locked door again, though saying that it was locked for a reason, and that it just is. We assumed he wouldn't open it, and we're just doing a Ouija board or EVP sesh or something. Now he seemed skeptical, but agreed to tell us where it was. There's all sorts of stories about this cabin, with the tales of the locked door being the most popular, of course. Other stories spoke of sightings of humanoids, unidentified lights in the sky and in the surrounding woods, ghost encounters, shadows, phantom smells, saying people had gone mysteriously missing in the area, strange sounds like sonic booms were said to rock the little valley the cabin was built in, and apparently a fire nearly burnt it to the ground more than a decade ago, but a heavy rain stopped the blaze, or so they say. Now personally, the stories what was in the guest book intrigued me the most. See, back when the cabin was being rented, which I guess was sometime in the 80s, there was this guest book that the owner left there, and like every other guest book, previous guests wrote random things in it. But what the guest who stayed at the cabin wrote was worrying, to say the least. It was some of the most interesting. Heard somebody stomping up and down the stairs at night. Think it was coming from behind the damn door. I couldn't open it. I think someone's down there. And another. Woke up to the smell of burnt food. Checked the fridge, and there's nothing there. Went on a hike for half the day. Came back, and the door that was supposed to be and stay locked was open. Ran outside to my car for a weapon, but when I got back, the door was closed and locked again. Didn't hear or see anything else for the rest of the time, but I couldn't get the door open again. So creepy, yeah. But enough to deter us from exploring? No. Now, they're just stories. And I was a group skeptic. Frankly, I was just going to the cabins for giggles, really. I wasn't going to let a little folklore scare me or my friends away. I figured the guy who owned the cabin was just creepy and probably lived in the basement, spying on his guests, maybe even kidnapping them, which honestly is a lot more freaky than anything paranormal if you ask me. Altogether, there's 4 of us: Casey, Lusa, Grace and me. We left Border sometime around 10 AM. The cabin was near Rifle, in the Ruta National Forest, so it's a little more than a 3-hour drive in good weather. Luckily, it was unseasonably warm that day. The cabin was located far from any paved roads, so I parked at the closest trailhead. We got out, hiking our way towards it, using handwritten directions Luca's co-worker given us, trying to make it there before the sunset. Near dusk, we all stumbled across a half-burnt, half-buried structure with a sunken roof. The front door was entirely missing. The forest had grown up and around it. We crept carefully through the door frame, looking around with flashlights. It's obviously very creepy, run down, reclaimed by nature. It was half full of dirt and mud. This left us crouching down under what remained of the roof. Near one of the still standing walls was a sunken door, only half of it showing. That's it, the door. It's Casey. He ambled forward and began pounding on it, yelling for whoever's inside to open up. We tell him to stop and he says, "Are we scared?" Casey walked back towards the front door and disappeared around the corner. After a moment, he yelled, "There's nothing back here. Wall is totally straight. Must be a door to nothing." He pounds on it a few times before rejoining us back inside. Grace was glaring. Luna looked into the ground. "Now, not wanting this trip to go to waste," I said. "Hey, Case, I know what you can do. Seeing as you're not scared at all, sit in the woods, alone in the dark for 30 minutes. Now surprisingly he agreed, but on one condition. He got to bring a flashlight with him. We all said yeah. Grace warned that he should stay within our hearing range, just in case. With that, he set off into the darkened woods, every so often yelling, "Hey, can you guys hear me?" Surrounded by silence now, we turn our flashlights and try out a few EVP questions, recording on 2 of our phones. We wanted to see if there was anything there. After only 3 questions, Grace, who had been peering around the edge of the doorframe into the woods, spoke up. Guys," she said. "There's a guy there, and it's not Case." I crept over to her and peeked out, and indeed, there was a guy standing there, a few yards into the forest, moonlight glistening off his mask. He's wearing all black, holding gasoline canisters, as though he's staring at us, slowly stepping behind one of the trees away from sight. What the hell? I ducked away from the door, pulling Grace back to the darkness. Do you think he saw us? We should go. Casey, Lucas said suddenly. We have to get him. We can't leave him out here. This is a setup. We then silently agreed that this is something we have to do, and after checking that the coast was clear, we run for it. We were too afraid to call out to Casey or use bright lights, so we snuck around the forest using red tinted lights, each one of us following close to the other. Then we heard it. Casey calling for us back at the cabin. Again, we run for it. The first thing I saw when we got back to the cabin was, it appears red, as though it's on fire. The second thing I saw was that the half door that wouldn't budge earlier is wide open, and the light's coming from it, now dimming. Third, I saw Casey. He was standing just beyond the doorway inside whatever laid beyond it, the back of his head facing us, looking down. We call out for him, ask him how he got inside, said to him, have you seen that guy? But he doesn't move a muscle. Then the light goes out. Grace screamed. I clicked my flashlight on and aimed it at him. He turned around. His eyes looked terrifying. We said, hey, you can stop messing with us now. He laughs, not sounding like him, almost like somebody else speaking. Then we hear, hey guys, can you hear me? I span around thinking there's another person with us, thinking Casey's messing with us, but he wasn't. When I turn back, my light hits Casey full on. He was crawling out of the doorway in sporadic jerks. His limbs aren't looking normal, speaking gibberish. We ran. And as we blindly ran into the darkened forest, the light from our flashlight swinging wildly around us, I ran straight into something soft and warm. Another human. It was a guy we seen earlier, still with the gas canisters. Grace screamed again. I leapt up and we bolted. The guy now yells at us again. Wait, he says. Behind us, there's an inhuman roar, and I glance back. Casey was running faster than I've ever seen anybody run. The guy in the mask yelled again. Now, Casey had been tackled to the ground. They struggled for a moment and fell hard. I tripped too. Luca lifted me up, and together, we kept on running and didn't stop until we met the trailhead where my car is parked. We leap inside. What about Casey? Just go. Behind me, Grace was screaming and crying. I gun it and don't stop until we reach rifle, where that we're finally able to calm down. Luca was convinced that Casey was messing with us, that the other guy in the mask was his friend. Me? I'm not sure. Grace agrees with me. She thinks something paranormal and very dark and dangerous happened that night. She thinks Casey was possessed. And the guy in the mask was the one who owned the place, definitely, and was doing some kind of cult thing, or hypnosis. But the only thing I know for certain is that something strange happened that night. I don't believe Casey was messing with us. And after a few days, I got several texts from Casey asking what happened, if we burned the cabin, why we left him. I texted Grace and Luca about it, and they say he'd reached out to them too. We all agreed to ignore him. I ended up blocking his number. Still not 100% he wasn't messing with us. This was easily the most scary thing that ever happened to me in my life.
I woke up on a Tuesday night a few months ago. It was 10 PM because I hadn't slept the previous night and had fallen asleep in the middle of the day. I got up, got dressed, and because it was nighttime and I had nothing to do, I sat on my computer. I watched YouTube, browsed Reddit, listened to some music, and talked to some of my friends on Discord for a few hours. Eventually I developed a headache. Not a very bad one, but it was irritating. So I went downstairs into the kitchen, fumbled around while I was trying to find some ibuprofen. I looked in a couple of drawers and eventually found it. I opened it, took 2 and swallowed them down, and with some water as well. Then I returned to my room. At the time, I was watching a playlist on YouTube. All the videos on there were somewhat lengthy, about 25-35 minutes each, but I had time to kill. I was on the second video when I went downstairs. Anyway, 10 minutes after I came back to my room, I woke up. I had an extremely painful migraine, but I had just taken medicine, so there was nothing I could do. I had no idea why or how I'd fallen asleep. I wasn't tired and was in the middle of watching a video. I had no reason to have gone to bed and didn't even remember doing so. I checked the clock and saw that only around 10 minutes had passed. I sat back on my computer and was instantly thrown off by something. I was on episode 16. Averaging the length of each video to 30 minutes, that means 8 hours had passed. What? This doesn't make sense, I murmured to myself over the sound of my blood rushing through my head. I activated dark mode for YouTube to try and alleviate some of the pain from looking at the bright screen before checking my history. Every single video had been played. Stranger still, every thumbnail had a full red bar at the bottom, meaning not only had every video been played, they'd been played from beginning to end until the 16th when I woke up. But I distinctly remember checking the clock before getting my pills. It was 12:53 PM on Tuesday, March 3rd. I woke up at 1:08 AM on Wednesday, March 4th. It had been 15 minutes since I got my meds, and I know I did because the bottle of water I brought up with me was on my desk. 8 hours had just been wiped off the face of the earth. I refreshed YouTube and all the videos were still there. This wasn't a glitch. I noticed how hot it was in my room. I also noticed a strange smell lingering in the air. It was a grimy, burning kind of smell. It must have been what caused my migraine. Instinctively, I reached over and felt my PC, and it was considerably warmer than usual. And this thing is a gamer monster. It's hard to push this thing to its limits. I opened up Aegis and saw that all 8 of my CPU cores were almost at 100%, and my CPU's temp was at 112. Not good at all. I looked at the task manager and saw that Google was using up 96% of my processor, and yet I had one tab open, the video. Now, anyone who doesn't know about PCs or hardware in general, basically that means that all of my PC's power was being used on this one Chrome tab, and for a PC that can run the newest games on the highest settings without as much as a sweat, this is very unusual. I had no clue what was happening, so I stared out my window for a few minutes while I tried to figure out how 8 hours had just disappeared. The sky was brown and it was windy. Typical British night really. Nothing out of the ordinary was going on outside. I saw cars crawling up the road, lights from planes slowly blinking off in the distance, the soothing glow of lampposts. Most depressingly though, because I live in a city, there were no stars to be seen. I felt a little hungry, so I got up and reluctantly crept back into my kitchen. I was frightened of going through my house at night. I opened the fridge up to see if there was anything particularly appetizing in there. I found nothing that interested me, so I looked in my cupboard and saw some biscuits. Since my mind was a bit flustered, I needed to relax. So I made a cup of tea and grabbed some biscuits, and decided I was going to sit down and watch a movie to clear my mind. I took my tea and biscuits back upstairs, and I opened the door and walked over to my chair. That was the last thing I remember doing before I woke up again. This time I was annoyed. I didn't really understand what was going on, and I needed to find out. I got up once again and checked the clock. 1:32 AM. I went to take a sip of my tea and I noticed it was mouldy. The biscuits were soft too, when before they were hard. Tea usually takes a few days to go mouldy, but once again I hadn't been out for more than 15 minutes. This time I wasn't as bewildered, considering the effects of the first time hadn't completely gone yet, so in a weird way it wasn't as surprising. I was annoyed, however, that I wouldn't be having any tea and biscuits now, as I had used the last of the sugar. I pushed them aside and leant over my desk to open the blinds, because not only were they down, but they were shut. I never even used my blinds, so again, that was odd. I twisted the slit to open them, and I stumbled backwards in a panic and fell on my bed. I just lay there, staring. Out of that window, I saw something so beautifully, yet utterly terrifying. Something I never thought I'd see. Millions of stars lit up the sky, and I could see all of the clusters and gas clouds scattered throughout the galaxy. I was seeing the Milky Way for the first time in my life, completely free of light pollution. How? I lived in the middle of a dense population centre. I had just seen the sky out of my bedroom window, and it was a dull brown colour. I snapped out my awe-induced trance and grabbed my phone. I opened the camera out of excitement. I wanted to keep this moment. But in the camera, showed the same gloomy brown as before. I brushed it off as a problem with the camera's exposure. I sat there for a full hour before I decided that I'd seen all I could from my window. I started up my computer because for some reason it was off, even though I know it was on when I left it, because I just put a movie on and I was going to watch it. I reclined in my chair and even fell asleep watching the film. I woke at 11 AM the same day. I went to the toilet, had a shower and cooked some eggs for breakfast. I watched the TV for a while before growing bored and talking to my friends again on the phone. I had completely forgotten about the events that happened that night. One of my friends, Josh, asked me to go back on Discord and wanted to know if I'd be down to play a game with him. I said yes and ventured back upstairs into my room and sat down on my computer. I woke up at 12:06 AM. Straight away, thoughts flooded my mind as I remembered the previous night. I felt deflated. My phone was dead, so I put it on charge. A few minutes later, I woke up to a myriad of messages from all my friends and family. Things like, "Where did you go? I thought he was going to chill and play some CS." 4th of March. "Are you okay? Me and Alfie have both been trying to call you, but you're not answering. Where are you?" 5th of March. "We're so worried, please respond. You've been gone a week and no one can get a hold of you. We've even called your parents." March 10th. I messaged everyone I knew and told them I was safe, but I'm not. My friend came round to check on me, but he never arrived. He sent me a picture of him on his phone, standing right in front of where I was sitting in my room. I wasn't there in the picture, and he was not standing in front of me in real life. Right now my computer's calendar reads April 12th, and so does my phone. The rest of the world is on July 4th. Every time I leave, the amount of time that passes increases. The first time, it has in a few hours. The second, days. The third, weeks. The last time I went out, a full month had passed when I woke up. The next time I leave my room, a minimum of a year will pass, and I'm afraid that I'm going to die here. If you find yourself suddenly awakening with no memory of falling asleep, and with no injuries, move house and never, ever come back.
I read once that, in antiquity, people were advised to avoid the forests and wilds. These territories were treacherous, and often unexplored or unmarked. Those who would enter would not always return, and so the myths began to spread that terrible things lurked within these lands. Now most people were content with letting the untamed land remain so. As time went on, most people around the world moved on to fearing other things. I, however, have come to fear the woods like our ancestors did. Now my family moved to a small wooded town of Sunderland, Vermont when I was 8. My parents wanted some quiet place that wasn't so crowded. Something in contrast to somewhere like Boston. I didn't particularly want to move, but I hated Boston, so didn't argue. The place my parents bought was so rustic. It was a 2-story with a backyard, resting against the edge of the western forest. For the first 8 years I lived in Sunderland, things were normal. The woods and I had a healthy relationship. I'd hang out within viewing range of the home, never going after dark. That changed when I was a junior in high school. That's when my nightmare began. It was late afternoon. The sky is truly grey. My friend Chris and I went into the woods behind my home to smoke. Now we were really bored at this point. My friend Chris says, "Have you ever explored deeper than this?" I said a couple of times with my mum and dad, but I never really went anywhere. "That means it's time for adventure," he said. "I've got the perfect solution if you're fear of getting lost." Chris stopped, dropping his backpack at his feet, rummaging around for a moment to pull out a can of red spray paint. "We can make a ring on the trees we pass so we don't get lost." I say, "Why are you even carrying that?" He said, "You never know when you want to mark your territory." "You're an idiot," I laughed. We continue going deeper into the forest, Chris marking the way. I let him walk ahead of me as we walk further on the ground made soft by years of decay. After a few minutes, he slowed down abruptly before carrying over to something and saying, "Look at this. Check this out." Just in front of Chris was a pit, probably 3 to 4 meters in diameter. It looks as though someone had used a giant post hole digger to lift a perfect cylinder out of the forest floor. Rope-like vines hung around the edges, but the walls of the hole were perfectly smooth. "How far down do you think it goes?" "No idea. Let's throw stuff in." I kick a rock in, waiting to hear it collide with something, but there's only silence. Chris threw a couple of branches as I stood close to the edge, watching them fall back into the black silence again. "Freaky," Chris said. I looked down and it's mesmerizing. The longer I stare, the more nervous I felt. I don't like it. My head hurts looking at it. There must be spiders down there. Let's go home. We watch a cigarette fall into the hole. "Man, that goes far," I say as we both make our way to my home. I felt like I'd seen or done something I wasn't meant to though. I revisited the site of my nightmares that evening. In my dream, I was staring up at myself and Chris from within the mosh pit, while Chris tossed something down. I watch it fall in slow motion. I can see it's a rock. It felt as though it was falling for an eternity. When it finally touches the ground, there was then an inhuman cry that carved into my eardrums like a howl. My vision cannonballed out at this point and swerved through the trees in the forest until it stopped outside my bedroom window, where I saw myself asleep. I immediately woke up, looking out of my bedroom window, my eyes searching wildly for something out of place, but there's nothing there. I sat there hyperventilating, trying to calm down. The next day at school, I hurried over to Chris during our shared free period. "Hey man, how's it going?" I said nervously. You good?" "You scared the life out of me," he said while sleepily rubbing his eyes. "Sorry, I was taking a nap and didn't get much sleep. Did you have that dream?" I thought to myself, I wanted it to be a weird nightmare. I sat down across from him at the table and pulled my laptop out. "So what's good?" I said. "Not much, but listen to this." After I went home, I couldn't stop thinking about the hole. "Weird, right?" Yeah, I said. So I decided to do some Googling about these pits, and there's this thing called Mel's Hole. Some guy called this paranormal radio show in the 90s and talked about this hole that he found that was so deep, even an 80,000-foot fishing line couldn't reach the bottom. The thing might have been a hoax, but regardless, it got me thinking, is this like the one we found? No idea, but there's something not right about it, I said. It's really bothering me. I don't like it. I said, can we at least call it something else? How about the circle? Yeah, fine. Should we go check it out later? Chris said. Was he not afraid of this thing like I was? I said, I don't know. The circle makes me really anxious. So what are we supposed to do? Forget about it? Chris said, with a hint of frustration. I don't know, but what? You had a dream too, didn't you? Yeah, I said. I saw it too. I then sat there for a moment in silence. You want to go back after that? We had the same dream. That means something. Nothing happened. For all we know, we just got scared by our similar dreams. Chris had a point. But what if something does happen? Chris looks at me for a second, saying, "We'll go there." "Fine," I mutter. Now after school, I had a lot of homework to do that day, not feeling social, so I decided to stay in for the night while I was working on a short story. I can hear my parents get in from work. I continue typing when I hear footsteps ascending the staircase, stopping near me. I say, "What?" Silence. I shout for Mum, then Dad. Silence. Chills now slide down my spine as I remembered that dream from the night before. I sat froze to my chair until a heavy knock on the door made me jump in my seat. I stared at the door for what felt like hours, paralysed with fear. After a few minutes, I heard the front door open again, this time accompanied by my parents' voices. I breathed a sigh of relief. I'm just imagining things, I told myself. I opened my bedroom door to feel safer, knowing my parents were home. I get back to my story. Later that night as I drift off, the same dream I had the night before played back to me, once again. I woke up after seeing myself in bed, this time shivering and covered in sweat. I jumped out of my bed and pulled my blinds shut. I look over to the alarm clock and it says 3:02 AM. Now suddenly, I hear slow, methodical footsteps ascending the staircase again. Moving quietly, I shoved the mini fridge in my room, in front of the door going back to bed, cowering under my sheets. I said go away under my breath. And now there's something running at the door, and bang, the door shakes again. I'm very worried now, but drifted into an uneasy sleep. The following morning, I'm awoken by a heavy banging on my door. I jolted upright. "Heather, open this now," my mum shouts. I sighed in relief as I got out of my bed, moving the fridge away from the door. My mum instantly opens it. "Why was your door blocked?" I debated telling her the truth, but she wouldn't believe me. I was moving my furniture around last night and forgot to move the fridge back. Sorry. My mum looked at me with exasperation. "Okay, but don't leave it. Don't leave it in front of your door. What if there's a fire?" "Sorry, Mum," I said. "Come downstairs for breakfast. Dad made waffles." When I got to school, I immediately saw Chris. I said, "I think something followed us from the circle." "What are you talking about?" he replies. "So nothing happened to you yesterday night?" "No, why?" "Something tried to get to my room." "How'd you know?" he said. "Just trust me, Jesus." "Alright, calm down, tell me what happened." I then told Chris everything that I'd experienced that night. "Christ, do you think it will ever happen again tonight?" "I don't know. Probably. We have to do something." "We don't even know what that thing is or what it wants. What can we do?" he said. "Maybe there's some kind of offering we can make. I think the rock falling down is a sign." "I don't think so." "You got a better idea?" he said. "No, I guess not. We should try throwing some meat down." "What else do demons want? Flowers? Mixtapes?" I replied sarcastically. "Fine, I'll get meat and jewelry." So that afternoon, I watched as Chris walked up my driveway. "You ready?" I said. "Yeah, are you?" "You don't look so good," Chris replied. "I don't really want to go back there, but I'd rather fix whatever's happening." The two of us followed the marked trees to the circle. "Ugh," Chris exclaimed. Holding his nose, "It smells bad." "Did it smell last time?" I couldn't remember. "Definitely not," he said. I peered over the edge and felt an urge to jump, stepping back. "Alright, let's throw in the offerings." Chris threw some leftover meat he had in his fridge in the hole, and I threw the jewelry I didn't wear anymore. Nothing happened. "Is that it?" Chris said. "We won't know until tomorrow." I felt a sense of relief as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. We went back to my place and played video games until Chris had to go home. I felt uneasy but hopeful as night came. I hadn't heard anything out of place so far when I went back to bed. I laid there listening to dark silence, fearing that it would not last. To my surprise, it did. I finally fell asleep and didn't want to wake up until morning. The offering worked. When I got to school, I approached Chris. "Hey man, I think we did it." "I don't know about that," he said. My gut sank. "What do you mean?" "Well, once I got home last night, my whole house smelled like rotten eggs. I spent like an hour finding the source, but couldn't smell it anymore. So I just went to my room and went to my laptop. As I was falling asleep, I heard a glass shatter downstairs. I figured it was probably just my cat knocking over a glass or something. When I got down there, the glass from the front door was broken all over the living room floor. I couldn't see anyone outside, but I got this awful feeling I shouldn't be there. Where were your parents? Late night, they didn't get back until after all this. Well, what happened next? I didn't go outside. I called my parents and told them someone threw a rock through the front door. They said they'd deal with it when they're home. I just went to my room and looked at eye bleach and shy videos to calm myself, but I just couldn't shake the dread. Then there were heavy footsteps running down the hallway out of my bedroom. My heart was racing. They'd reach the end of the hall, then go to the opposite direction. Finally, something slammed heavily into my door. I was freaking out so much by now, especially when I realized my phone was downstairs. Why didn't you call the cops when you heard the door shatter? I don't know, I was freaking out. Chris sighed. Anyway, I heard the footsteps above me in the attic too. Then something tapping on my window. I was too afraid to open the curtains. Eventually I heard my parents' car moving up the driveway, and suddenly the sound stopped. It took me a few minutes to calm myself down, but I told my parents that I thought somebody broken in and maybe hiding. They then came by and did a search. They didn't find anything though. They said they'd station a car outside for a bit. Well, what should we do? Chris fell silent for a minute. What if it wasn't something living? No, we can't do that. Are you serious? Chris is getting agitated. I understood his fear, but I didn't want to do something violent to appease this thing. Listen man, I want this to stop as much as you do, but not like this. It doesn't have to be a dog or goat or something. We could just trap a squirrel. If you trap them, then fine, I said. That night I dreamt again, but the nightmare changed. I was dangling in the pit clutching a vine, filled with dread as I peered into darkness below. I tried climbing out, but the vine broke. As I fell deep into the abyss, windows started appearing in the dirt, and a stone surrounded me. I could see my family, Chris, and windows that shadowed families and children in vintage clothing. The further I fell, the more disturbing the images through the window became. My eyes flooding with tears. I started to see people I knew from school suddenly weeping blood. I saw my parents lying motionless in the back. I saw Chris crying in his bed, blood everywhere. My descent slowed until I eventually landed in my bed. It formed out of utter darkness. There was a steady tapping at my window, and I slowly got out of bed despite my overwhelming terror and pain. I felt like I was walking through the water as I moved through my room. I approached the window. I could see the outline of Chris in my yard. My window unlocks itself and gently opens, and a breeze comes through. "Chris," I shout. He began to laugh. The sound of a crowd of people. Not one guy. He sank into the ground as the world around me began to shake. I woke up to find my bed shaking violently. I start screaming, and it suddenly stops. My heart was racing, and I barely had time to catch my breath before I heard a light tapping on the window. I tried to ignore it, but the longer I did so, the heavier it became until I heard the glass crack. Then silence. I was not about to look out my window. I picked up my cell phone and dialed Chris's number. He picked up immediately. "You okay? What's up, Chris?" "More stuff happened. We need to finish this tomorrow." "Did the traps catch anything?" I said between heavy breaths. "I haven't checked yet." "What happened?" "I woke up from a nightmare to my bed shaking, something hitting on my window." "Were you awake when I called?" "Yeah, something happened here." I went downstairs to get a glass of water, and all of the windows and doors in the entire house are open. I tried to wake my parents, but they're really, really cold. "What about the cops? Wasn't there one stationed?" "They're asleep too." "The cops are useless. Is everything okay?" "I've been hearing footsteps throughout the house. I've just been hiding in my room. I'll go to bed when the sun's up again." "Just stay on the phone with me." "Okay." I stay on the phone with Chris until the sunlight pours through my windows. I can hear what sounds like distant whispering outside my window throughout the night, but they disappeared with darkness. The rest of the day went normal, and the two of us met up after school in my backyard. My parents were still at work as I waited outside my house. After a couple of minutes, Chris came around the corner holding two humane traps, one with a rabbit in it and the other a restless raccoon. My heart sank thinking of what was going to happen. "You ready to end this?" Chris said to me. "Yeah, I feel bad for them though." Chris looks at the animals briefly and frowns. "I'm not excited either, but we gotta do this. Come on, let's go." The two of us walk through the forest, following the marked trees to the circle. The land around us is silent. In the cages, the animals are going berserk, biting at the cage, making horrible sounds. I felt emotional anguish and physical dread. As we approached the circle, Chris turned to me saying, "Does it look bigger to you?" It definitely was. "Alright, do you want to throw 'em in?" Chris said to me, lifting up the cages. "I really don't. I'll cry if I do." "Okay, I'll do it." Chris walks over to the edge, peering inside, taking a deep breath. "Okay." I've watched as Chris threw the panicking animals into the abyss. The sounds of their whimpers and cries going silent as the circle swallows them. Tears welled up in my eyes and my face. "Is that it? Can we go?" "Yeah, let's go. I need to relax." As night fell, we parted ways. Now the events of the last few days have just got weirder and weirder. Since Friday night, I stayed up a little late, really anxious, not able to sleep. By 1 AM, my parents had gone to bed, and nothing had happened yet. I was beginning to feel like things had worked out, but I checked my phone. There were notifications from Chris. I decided to call him to check up. All I got was a voicemail. "He's just asleep." I thought. I continued to play video games until I heard shouting outside my window. I recognized Chris's voice. I immediately ran to my window and opened it. There he was, standing in moonlight in my backyard. "What are you doing here?" I whispered. We have to go to the circle. things are worse. What are you talking about? What happened? Oh, Chris sighed. Ah. I sighed back and put on some jeans, grabbing a flashlight. I also grabbed a knife just in case. I went downstairs, careful to not wake my parents, and went to the back door. Chris is gone. I was scared, but I wasn't about to let my best friend go to the circle alone. It occurred to me that this might be a trick, an inhuman force appearing as Chris. This was a common twist in horror films, I thought. Even so, I wasn't going to risk leaving Chris alone in the woods without a flashlight. I opened the door, take a deep breath and enter the woods. There was a stringent mist hanging over the forest as I followed the trees. Calling out Chris's name, gripping the knife in my left hand as I carefully made my way through the woods. Eventually I came to the circle. It's wilder now. It seemed to be growing before my eyes. There's a loud groan as a tree at the edge has lost its grip, tumbling into the abyss. Heather, I heard Chris behind me. Chris, I said. He was standing with a slouch just a couple of feet away. What happened? Why are we here? I don't know. But it's worse now, Heather. Chris, calm down. Talk to me. No, Chris shouted. He pushed me down and I fell. I looked behind me and I'm so close to the hole. Chris, what the hell? I shouted as I stood up. He grunted and laughed at me. I dodged him and stumbled around, nearly falling into the abyss. I have to, Heather, it's the only way. He lunges at me again, successfully knocking me against a tree. My head colliding with the bark. I dropped everything in my hands as I hit the tree. He shoved me harder against the bark as I tried to punch and push him away. I'm sorry, Chris, I shouted as I brought my left leg up between his knees. He instantly keeled over as I grabbed my knife from beside the tree. Calm down, I said. I don't want to use this. Chris moans in pain and looks up at me before trying to lunge at me again. I sidestepped him, slashing him clumsily with the knife, tearing his shirt. Everything's happening so fast. Chris cried out and came at me again. I swung the knife frantically as he approaches me, landing one swipe on his torso. He put his hand to his chest, filming the warm blood seeping through his fingers. He looked at me with a look of anger that I've never seen before. I was afraid. I tried to step back, but he lunges at me again. I raised a knife and stabbed at him. Try not to kill him. He grunts loudly as a knife pierces his shoulder, stumbling back to the edge of the circle. No, Chris. I sprang forward and tried to grab him as he falls backwards, but I was too late. I watch in terror as he disappears into the abyss, screaming as he fell. The ground quaked as the hole stops growing. I collapsed on the ground crying. Chris, no, I cried. I've killed my best friend. Even though in self-defense, it's not the point. I wanted to wake up, but it's not a dream. I'm living a nightmare. Too distraught to comprehend what's just happened. I grabbed my flashlight, stumbling back through the mist. I woke my parents up as soon as I got home, telling them everything. They were skeptical, but my dad agreed to follow me out to the woods after seeing how scared I was. The mist was gone. I led him along the marked trees, reaching the end. Heather, there's nothing here. It was a dream. My dad sighed. I stared in absolute disbelief at the solid ground before me. This was where the circle was. I could see the rock that Chris had tripped on, and the disturbed soil where the tree had fallen into nothingness. I propped myself against a tree, overcome with nausea. "Honey, you okay?" my dad said, putting a hand on my shoulder. It must have been a dream," I said. I didn't believe it. Everything I just experienced was so surreal. The knife, the circle, the blood, Chris's screams, all serenading into my brain. But I didn't want to try and rationalize it. We return home and I go to bed, although I never went to sleep. I kept trying to call Chris throughout the night and the following days, but he never answered. Neither would his parents when I called his home. I knocked on their door, but no one seemed to be home. The following Monday, Chris didn't show up to school at all. The same with Tuesday and Wednesday. The police searched his home and found the bodies of both parents. The cops theorized that Chris had murdered his parents, ran away to avoid arrest, but I knew the truth. Chris was dead. I was the only one who knew what had really happened to him, but what could I say? People would just think that I was crazy, or that I was trying to cover my friend. The circle was gone, so was my best friend.
It started out relatively benign. I was awakened one day to the sound of quick footsteps outside my door. I would have normally thought nothing of it and gone back to sleep, but on this particular night, I was gripped with fear. It sounded like someone was running on the landing on the other side of my door. When I opened my bedroom door, my heart started to race. My 10-year-old brother was running laps around the landing, arms stiff by his side, eyes wide open, curly hair bouncing all over his face. I stood in silence for a full minute, unsure of how to react. My immediate thought is that he was sleepwalking, but this looked different. His eyes were wide open, and I could quite easily see a palpable fear behind them. I remembered hearing that you shouldn't suddenly awake a sleepwalker, or they could be in shock, but this felt different. "Jared," I whispered. No response. He continued to briskly walk, arms and legs stiff as logs. "Jared!" And just like that, he seemed to snap out of it. But rather than acknowledging me at all, he did a short beeline and continued back in his bedroom at the same brisk pace. I warily watched him crawl into bed and roll over. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw Jared quietly chomping down a bowl of Cheerios. "What was with you last night?" I asked him. Jared looked up from his breakfast. His face looked high-strung and tired. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. "What are you talking about?" Jared asked. I thought I'd seen the last of it, but my brother's nightly excursions continued. Every few nights, when my house was asleep, I would be ripped from the depths of my sleep by the sound of hurried footsteps, and every time I opened the door to face them, I would see Jared doing laps around the stair landing, eyes agape with discernible terror. And every single time, I was able to usher him back to bed by simply calling out his name. I thought I'd seen the worst of it until a few weeks ago. Midterm exams meant a lot of caffeine, and a lot of caffeine meant I would certainly be getting up to pee in the middle of the night. I opened the bathroom door, rubbing my eyes. I turned on the light and began to rip down my PJs when I saw something in the bathtub that caught my eye. Eyes bloodshot and wide open, Jared stood in the corner of the bathtub, staring right into the mirror across from him. I felt my insides clench with fear, and my heart nearly ripped out my throat. Jared's arm was so stiff that his knuckles were white against his side. He looked oddly still. There was no discernible breath leaving his lungs. "Jared, what are you doing?" "There's something in the mirror," Jared said, and goosebumps erupted across my body. His eyes did not leave the mirror once. His eyes were now filled to the brim with tears. I felt my own eyes water as I looked into the spot of the mirror where Jared was staring. What I saw was Jared staring back at me, smiling with a look of a man who was sick with joy. His huge smile and wide eyes looked oddly alien in the dim light of the washroom. I felt a prickly, hot feeling spread across my back and neck, and momentarily got lightheaded. I whirled back around and heard a thump beside me as Jared fainted in the tub and slammed his head. It's been a few weeks since that night. The doctors told us that Jared was fine medically. He spent days in the sleep lab, running every test you could think of, and nothing. They didn't discover a single anomaly in all of those tests. Except Jared doesn't talk anymore. He hasn't said a word in weeks or made eye contact. The team of psychiatrists that have been seeing him think that he got so spooked that night that it might have sent him into shock. To me, he looks devoid of all emotion at all. Not sad or afraid of anything. He just looks empty. I've stopped drinking coffee before bed, and if I really need to go, I leave a plastic water bottle or two on the nightstand beside me.